Hello, everyone. So happy Wednesday. It's a beautiful Wednesday over here in Reston, Virginia. We are located coming live straight from the DC area. I live about 30-40 minutes outside of DC. So it's a beautiful Wednesday and coming live from the USA. So whilst we wait for more people to tune in, could you introduce yourselves, which part of the world that you're from and what time it is or which state you're from, your name and your favorite flavor of ice cream, so we can get the conversation going. But in the meantime, let me introduce the topic that we're going to be speaking. We're going to be speaking about ethical decision making today, ethical decision making. And before I go into it, let me introduce myself. I'm your host, Mila Dushun. I'm a culture scientist, and it is every Wednesday at noon, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We talk about rethinking culture, right? Culture science explored. How do we touch on different facets to really create a more sustainable culture? All right, we have Jason from Canada. Maple walnut ice cream is his favorite. Welcome. Hi, Jason. And we have Krishy. Hi, Krishy. If you'd like to introduce yourself, which part of the world that you're tuning in from. So for those who just tuned in, I am your host, Mila Dushul, and this is Rethink Culture. Every Wednesdays, I do this for 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the interaction. So today's topic is ethical decision making. And this is such a fitting topic, ethical decision making, just based on how the whole world, whole climate is shifting, right? In times of crisis, we see leadership either step up or step down or hide behind the curtains. And during pandemic is the time where our people are looking up to us as leaders for either change or implementation improvement, not just for the situation but for our quality of lives. Ethical decision making happens is inherently present in the workplace, in our communities, in a nation, in schools as well. You wouldn't think in schools, but if you think about it, your principals, your teachers, they are all forms of leaders. Student leaders are leaders as well. So that's why it is so imperative to really rethink how we make decisions that impact not just people who look like us, who sound like us, or who think like us, but also for people who do not agree with us, or who do not think like us, or who do not function like us. That's the beauty of diversity. All right, we have someone who's from Singapore, and the time is 12 a.m. over there, and his favorite ice cream is strawberry. That's great. So let's dig into the topic. What is ethical decision making? Let's talk about ethical first. So I'm going to throw out the question out to you. I want to hear from you. What does ethical means to you? So what does, I'm typing it. This is live, so I'm typing everything live. What does ethical mean to you? So I want to find out what your perspective is on this. What does ethical mean to you? And then we'll kind of deep dive into decision making as well. So I have been doing lots of research as to what ethical decision making is. What does ethical stand for? What is ethics, right? Sometimes it's based on your morals, right? Making the right decision, not being afraid or not compromising someone else's voice or someone else's privilege, right? Sometimes it happens when we are in a huge melting pot, in a really diverse setting, right? We feel like, I'm going to use the United States as an example. It's such a huge melting pot, and people feel that, POCs, people of color, do not deserve that kind of privilege as the more dominant culture have. So when we decide, and it happens unconsciously or consciously, and this is where the conscious bias and the unconscious bias comes in. But before we go deeper into that, ethical is where we really think about, what feels right, what is right. Oh, we have got a comment coming in. Hi, don't, yeah. Hello. So I'm going to, as people say hello, I'm just going to highlight them as well. So going back to the topic, I want to hear your thoughts. What does ethical mean to you? But to me, ethical means making decision or doing something right that treats other people equally or with equity, treats other people with respect, accepting other people with respect, and truly listening to their struggles. Because the invisible only becomes visible when we truly understand them. So I pose this question, don't be shy, type it out. With live, I'm like switching back and forth into the live stream and what's coming up on Twitter as well. So yeah, I want to hear from you. What does ethical means? So someone asks, ethical means respect? Question mark. So ethical means, showing someone with respect, treating them with respect. Respect as in it's mutual respect, not with the sense of social exchange, right? So when I say social exchange bias, not in the form of if you give me respect, then only will I give you respect. It needs to be in the pure, when I say purest form, in a very humane, human way, where you really value that person, not because based on gender or age or socioeconomic status, right? You need to make decisions, treat someone else with the intention and looking at them from a very humane perspective. So that's what ethical and ethics means. What is right, doing something right, what not treating someone else badly. Even if you see a homeless person, you don't like throw food at them. You give them in a very polite, kind way, showing kindness. And we have Hatton Boots saying ethical means acting honestly when nobody is watching. This is such a great point. This is a very imperative point. Especially when no one is watching, right? We see so many people, influencers or politicians or even leaders, right? They treat people nicely on the front end, on a facade level, where they have really fake conversation where they'll say, oh yeah, I include you to go to the conversation because other people are watching. But when other people are not there anymore, they disregard the person saying, oh no, your work is not good enough, your input is not good enough. So that's a very good point. Being honest even when no one is watching. Krishi shares that ethical means being truthful. This is a really great point. Truthful, right? We want to be truthful to people and be truthful all the time, because when lies come about, you're not being honest, you're not being true to yourself and true to the relationships that you are building. And truth plays a huge factor in building relationships and making decisions. Think about the decisions that you make even in a family, right? Even in a family dynamic. When you're making decisions, let's say if you're moving or going on a holiday, right? It's when you make those decisions, for example, if you're moving from one state to another state, or even from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, you're going to make those decisions that is best for the whole family, right? What is honest? What decisions do you make to create that trustworthy relationships, and also treat them in a very kind, humane way. So when you do take these decisions or make these decisions, it needs to benefit not just yourself. You can't say, oh, I want to move to this neighborhood because the coffee shop is across the street, or there's a shop that I can just walk in and get my croissants and pastries and cakes. I don't care about the rest of you. Or decide to live in a remote area where if you do have a disabled child or disabled family member, you have to think about how accessible it is. So those are all part of ethical decision making, right? To really truly value the well-being of others and not just yourself. But let's talk about this in a community basis or in a society basis, right? And I know Hats and Boots, we have spoken on Twitter before, and you're really passionate about coming to when we talk about in a society. But in a society perspective, how do you think decision making can impact us as a society to create sustainable lifestyle or sustainable livelihood? So I'd like to hear from you. So let me type in the question and then I'll wait for you to respond. So what kind of actions can we take when it comes to so here's the question. What kind of sustainable, let me show it to you. What kind of sustainable actions can we take when it comes to decision making for our society? When I say society, it can be any community of practice that you belong to. Society, let it be in your own neighborhood, or if you volunteer in a society where it's for the old age, caring for the old aged, or if you're caring for students with autism or children with autism, let it be anything. I'd like to hear from you. What kind of sustainable actions can we take when it comes to decision making for our society from your perspective? So as I wait, I'm going to touch on some of the efforts that that we can take when I say society, let it be any kind of community or practice, home, work, skills, wherever it is. Sustainability is something where it can scale and where you can sustain it to benefit other people from a very humane level, right? Where diversity, where inclusion is taken into consideration. So when we talk about sustainability, it's about how are you sustaining yourself in a very effective manner, right? So we have to really touch deeper into what does sustainability mean to different kinds of people, or in different parts of the world, or in different parts of the community, right? Because how we view sustainability is very different from someone who is from a third world country, right? Who is from a country of poverty, who are experiencing poverty, or people who are in a country where the access to education is very difficult, right? Or people living in a first world country where access to resources are different. So we have one of our comments coming in. So one of the comments are representatives need to hold town hall meetings to ensure that they are representing. That's a really good point, right? Representative to hold town hall meetings where representatives meaning that let it be your mayor or your governor or your minister, right? Whichever is representative of your community who takes action for political policies or whatever to change the quality of lives of citizens, of people around us. And this is such a great point, because when we hold meetings, right, when we are representing a whole group of people as leaders, we can't just make decisions based on our egocentric perspective, right? From our perspective, where we feel like, oh, this is right because this is how I look at it being right. We can't be doing that. We really need to understand and accept that we are representing people, represent as in listening to other people's concerns, listening to their struggles, right? Not just listen and say, oh, okay, I'll come back tomorrow, let's have tea, everything will be all right. No, listening in the sense that I hear you, I see you, let's work on this together. And also asking your people whom you're representing, asking them, what would be a sustainable solution look like, right? So we need to really engage with our people. So we have another comment saying a responsible decision which is considerable to each and everyone in the society. Very great point. This is a very, very great point. Considerable to each and everyone in our society. That's where the diversity aspect comes in, right? Because we can't just create decisions or come up with decisions that only facilitate a group of people who are what they look like us. So let's say if you're a 14-year-old and you're making decisions, okay, this is how I'm going to behave. This is if you're creating a party, right? The party will only have pizza, right? And this is what we eat. And then you invite other people who are in their 20s, let's say your family members or your parents who are in their 40s. What if they have gluten allergy, or what if they're allergic to pizza? So we need to make decisions that are considerable to everyone in the society. I'm just using the party as an example. And we also have hats and boots saying too often they follow dogma rather than representing their constituents. This is very true. And this is another key that hats and boots is sharing. The key is nothing about me without me. Oh, this is deep. Hats and boots, would you care to share? And It is so true. When we make a collective decision, we really need to understand it's not about me, it's about the other person, right? It can't be us without all others. You can't just decide to go on a holiday to Las Vegas when you have a 5-year-old, right? You can't bring your 5-year-old into a gambling casino. So really great points highlighted by all of you. Equity, listening, responsible decision, having a representative, holding meetings to really listen and gather those information. Those are all great sustainability. Coming back to our sustainability point, uh, you know, making those actions where the decisions are for our society. So I want to tap into the next form of layer that consists into our ethical decision making. Most of the times when we make ethical decisions, right, we need to eliminate our own biases. Biases can come in the form of conscious bias, unconscious bias, or conscious discrimination. So let's talk about what is unconscious bias. But before I say my version of unconscious bias, I'd like to hear from all of you. What does unconscious bias mean to you? Take a stab at it, take a guess what it means, and then we'll take it from there. So, in the meantime, let me talk about what unconscious bias can look like, right? Unconscious bias can look like anything. Usually it's learned from the telly, from the media, right? When we watch a program and they say that certain groups of people who look certain kind, I'm going to look brown people. Brown people does not mean that they are from South Asia or from West Asia. Brown people can be from South America, right? Tan people. So let's say I'm going to use, is this, if I'm, yeah, it's the Family Guy. No, not the Family Guy, sorry, Simpsons. Simpsons has got a character, Apu, who has got a 7-Eleven. So that cartoon portrays a very stereotypical portrayal of a certain type of a South Asian, right? So especially in the USA, when you see people who are from India, not all of them are 7-Eleven, but that cartoon portrays that anyone who looks brown or who is from India or who has got that kind of an accent tends to own 7-Eleven, tends to speak like that, tends to embody that kind of behavior, whatever that cartoon is portraying. We learn that from that cartoon and then come into reality. And when we see another person who fits that stereotype, right, who wears the sari or who is brown color or who puts the prayer thing on their forehead, and we adopt that and then have that stereotypical mindset and portray it in that way, and we immediately say, oh, you're from India, I know about your culture because I learned it from Family Guy, Apu. So those are the kind of unconscious bias. So I'm going to display what our viewers are saying. What is unconscious bias? It is the biases we hold that we often don't even know about. That's so true. We don't even know about because it's learned and it's in our unconsciousness. And then Dotya asks, you don't mean to take sides. I'd like to understand, you don't mean to take sides. Could you explain a little bit so I can explain it to the audience as well? So, and then another comment came in, we learn from upbringing and media and peers, sometimes traumatic or even good experiences. That's so true. That is such a good example. Traumatic experiences shape our unbiases, right? That is absolutely, absolutely true. I want to ask you, what kind of traumatic experiences have you experienced where you tend to hold that the person who looks like this, when they have treated me in a negative way, I'm going to portray them as this way. So I'm going to use an example. When I was a child, this is the first wave of racism that I experienced, right? And I'm not proud to share that I had gained that kind of stereotype, based on the trauma. So during a childhood, I was in primary school and my classmates were mixed, ethnically they were mixed. The first time I was called, "Oh, you're so black, stay away from us," was said this by a group of Chinese students, right? I was very hurt by how I was stereotyped and discriminated based on my skin color. And based on that, I had acquired, that was traumatic for me. Can you imagine 7-year-old hearing that? That was traumatic for me. So the more I had, the more I saw that kind of behavior from my classmates, I adopted that they were racist. So when I moved to different grades, right, when I went to primary 2, primary 3, I still had that same kind of mindset because it was learned from trauma. It was learned from my environment. But it took me a long time to really challenge my unconscious bias because what I saw was ingrained in my mindset. And whenever I saw someone else, I immediately thought, you're going to treat me in a very racist manner. So we still have other comments. So let's see. My wife gets anxious around vans with no windows as she was kidnapped as a child. This is such a great point. When something traumatic happens in your life, for example, Hudson would start shared this, his wife gets really anxious around vans because she was kidnapped as a child. So that traumatic experience when you see another van, that is in your unconscious bias that triggers that memory, right? And we're going to stereotype that all vans that is parked with no windows is going to be a kidnapping van. So that is such a great point. So unconscious bias in a nutshell is something that is learned from media, from our childhood, or constantly when we learn from our environment. Those are the different kinds of variables that comes into place that unconsciously is ingrained in our head, right? And sometimes when we catch ourselves saying that, "Oh, you are brown, you have to be from India," or you look like a Chinese, so you are from China. You look like a Chinese, so you are bringing the coronavirus. Especially in this epidemic, we need to challenge our unconscious biases, right? It's our unconscious biases learned from media morphs into conscious bias. This is the second factor that I want to touch on: conscious biases, right? Conscious biases can convert into conscious discrimination. So I want to hear from you. What does conscious bias mean to you? Oh, this is a great point, Dr. It means unsupported judgments based on one thing. Yes, very, very great point. Unsupported judgments based on one thing. Fabulous points. Very great point. Is there any no more comments? All right. So now I want to touch on unconscious bias. Conscious bias can become unconscious bias can become conscious bias. Just like, in primary school, I had that experience and I became consciously biased, thinking that every other classmate who was a Chinese was going to stereotype me and discriminate me. But it's important to challenge our own conscious biases. So I want to hear from you. What does conscious bias mean to you? To me, conscious bias is when we consciously, right? Judgment is actually the prejudice that we have against someone or group or a thing, right? It's learned and it's reiterated throughout our life, through our experiences, again, whatever that we are consuming around us. And usually it is of threat to us. When we see other people being a threat to our well-being, to our privilege, to whatever that we have had, that's when we feel like, oh, I need to protect myself because that person is challenging me. So we have, all right, biases we know we have and usually think are reasonable. Great point. Conscious bias is biases we know we have and usually think are reasonable. To us, from our stance, from our perspective, we usually think it's reasonable because we are going on a defensive stance, right? We are trying to protect ourselves. We are trying to protect our own privilege in the form of power, privilege in the form of resources, right? Privilege in the form of identity markers, whatever it is. For example, in the USA, right, gay marriage is such a huge topic that people fight for. It's so polarized, right? I know religion comes into place as well, where sometimes dominant culture in the form of religion, Christians say that it's not in the Bible. We need to reject that. It's an abomination, and gay people are not children of God. There's so many narratives that goes on, but right, there's always two sides as to why people are holding on to these biases based or out of fear or based out of something that they are not even exposed to, right? And something that we are fearful of, we are trying to protect ourselves, that we feel that this religion belongs to us, this Christianity belongs to us, this God that we speak of belongs to us, because it's a privilege that we have been grown up with, right? We fail to understand that humans or religion, whatever privilege is, does not just belong to us, right? God loves everyone, no matter what God looks like to each of you or in each religion. So when we become fearful, we reject them because they are not dominant in our lifestyle. We are not exposed to who they are, how they are, because we fail to understand that being gay is not a choice, right? In different parts of the world, people like men are born with female genitalia, and women are born with men genitalia. And it happens in India, and those groups are ostracized as well. So we need to really rethink that being gay is not a choice, or being a certain group or POCs is not a choice, right? We are all created the way that we are. But the importance is we have to embrace, we have to take that responsibility, social responsibility in understanding someone else. So someone says it means negative behavior which can be expressed through words and actions. That is very true, right? Conscious bias is something that we express. Hats and boots is saying, which is funny because it's only in the Old Testament and Christians have a new covenant with God. That's true. So our conscious biases, let it be out of fear, let it be out of when we fail to understand someone else, becomes conscious discrimination, where we're consciously saying, you do not belong here, we are going to kill you, or we are going to ruin your life, or taking away their privilege in the form of policies, right? And all of those impacts people. At the end of the day, each of us, we are all human beings. We all have got a beating heart. We all have got a brain. We all have blood. Yes, our DNAs are all different, but the schematic of being a human is all the same. You have a beating heart. You breathe in the same oxygen, right? You want to feel loved. You want to feel valued. You want to feel cared. You want to be hugged. So when we have conscious biases that converts into conscious discrimination, it actually eliminates us from making ethical decision making. And when we make ethical decision making, right, when you look at it, let it be in the form of schools, right? Schools, workplaces, communities, nation. People are impacted. When you look at schools, right, how often are children, even within a school system, are segregated? How many of you have been treated differently as a student by a teacher who doesn't look like you, using situational power, right? Or holding resources only to the top students? Those are not ethical decision making. Those are exclusive decision making. And we look at it in the workplace. Ethical decision making is not even present most of the time. Decision making is done in the form of exclusivity. I'm going to hire this person because this person is going to do exactly the same things that I tell them to do. This person is going to be a puppet. I don't care whether that person progresses or learns. I'm just hiring for the sake of eliminating my job, which is becoming monotonous. So ethical decision making at the workplace looks like, am I hiring people who will challenge the current schematic that is in place? Am I hiring people who will bring in their unique talent and skills, who will challenge me as a leader to make me grow? and impact not just me, but who will impact themselves and the people around us in the company and people who are yet to come in. So those are all ethical decision making where lives are improved, quality of well-being is improved, quality of a paycheck is also improved. When we take it into a perspective of communities, right, that changes as well. As to, are we making policies that impacts people? How are we providing policies that enable the disabled, right? How are we creating policies who are where we are supporting caregivers of disabled, right? How are we supporting family members who are single parent working to support the whole family and who are trying to go back to school? So we need to look at decision making from an extended lens where we look at our people. How do they belong in our society as a whole? How can we enable them from a very root level where their quality of lives are improved, the quality of paychecks are improved, the quality of well-being is improved? So we have another comment come in. I had a couple of teachers that had taught my dad and treated me as if I were him. This is a classic example of conscious discrimination. We often see and treat students, right, based on what our parents did. And that is such a shame on that teacher. Teachers, you are leaders as well. So shame on the teacher. My teacher was an idiot too. I can say this. It's been over 32 years. But teachers who shame their students, I have got zero respect for them. Teachers are enablers. Teachers, you are providing education. You are the seed. I feel that teachers are the seeds, primary level or kindergarten level or preschool level, right? You are the seed for children to either enable them or disable them. But if you're going to plant seeds of discrimination, plant seeds of stereotype, then you become responsible for the child's journey in life. So I'm really sorry to hear that. Hats and boots. I have a soft spot for children who have been abused because I was abused by my teacher as well, and it's not a very good feeling. So I know that we are running out of time, but actually we went 4 minutes over. Ethical decision making. Any last words from our viewers? I would like to take topics as to what are the topics that would you like to see or hear us discuss next week on Rethink Culture. Please do type in the comments. I like to say, when making decisions, please make ethical decisions to impact someone else, to impact your circle of friends. Capitalism, I'm not saying capitalism is bad, but capitalism can become really detrimental whilst making decision, right? Let's make decisions to impact our humans, impact our people. Let's enable them as opposed to disabling them or displacing them. Let's not displace our people, because when we take on a position of leadership as a leader, we need to enable others as opposed to dragging them. It's not about us. To be a leader who makes ethical decision making is truly to understand other people from their extended lens, to truly see their struggles, to truly walk the journey along with them that impacts them at a granular level. So I'm going to close down the chat. If there are no more comments, I'm going to wait for 1 more minute and see if there are any other commands. I'd like to know last question. What decision have you made? What decision have you made that has been ethical, that has impacted your group of people? Let it be your friends, in your school system, in a community, or even at workplace, or even a family. Because ethical decision making transfers everywhere, because decision making happens in life. What decisions have you made that has impacted someone positively? So share this while I wait for more comments to come on. So someone says, thank you, good chat. Thank you, Hats and Bits, for tuning in. So Last question, what decisions have you made that has impacted someone positively? Because the decisions that you make has to impact someone else positively. It has to trigger their purpose and trigger their spirit to be aligned with their purpose. You can't just treat everyone like shit. So if there are, I'm going to just wait for someone to respond to this, share your comments, and then we'll close out the chat. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, having all of you here. We have had people from Canada and Singapore. It's global. We're going global people. So Rethink Culture next week, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And I think it's Central Time, 11 a.m. and APAC time, 12 a.m. as well. So great seeing all of you. Thank you for joining in. I'm going to sign out. Keep on typing. I'll still get the comments. Peace out. Toodles. Rethink Culture next week, Wednesday.